we're going to do something quite a bit different than what we're used to in this section of the class. We've talked a lot about informal logic and the problems that can arise, especially with rhetorical devices and fallacies. But now we're going to look specifically at some of the formal tools that philosophers have come up with, specifically in determining whether or not an argument is valid. And the name of the system, the logical system, is sentence logic. So you can take an entire course on sentence logic, or a course on formal logic, which is usually broken down into a section on sentence logic and a section on quantificational or predicate logic. Sentence logic is also called truth functional logic, propositional logic. But we're going to start with this basic question: how do we know if an argument is valid or if it's not valid? So this one, we know it's valid. If I live in California, then that's a logical guarantee that I live in the United States. Why? Well, because California is in the United States. And compare that to this argument. Some dogs are black. Some cats are black. So, some dogs are cats. So what is the difference between these two arguments? The first one, the conclusion follows from the premise. And in the second one, the conclusion does not follow. But how do we know when that occurs? Up to this point, we just use our rationality. We use our logical intuitions. We look at the argument, and we can kind of just tell that the conclusion follows. But sometimes this intuition gets us into trouble. It leads us to thinking that some arguments are valid that aren't, or it leads us to think that some arguments that are valid are not. So what we're going to be doing is looking at two formal tests, checking procedures, one for invalidity, called truth tables, and then one for validity, called proofs. But we're going to immediately run into a problem. That these tests don't work in English. They only work in a formal language called sentence logic. I mean, imagine that you had a friend who was a logic whiz, but he only spoke Italian. Wouldn't it be nice to bring this friend along to your next exam, sort of like a phone a friend from that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show? You could call your logic whiz friend whenever you encounter an argument where you want to know the answer if it's valid or not. And your friend could give you the answer. But what if your friend only spoke Italian, didn't speak English, and you only speak English? Then it would be valuable to learn the language of your friend, to learn Italian, because that would give you access to a checking procedure for validity. And that's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to learn a new language. It's going to take, the amount of time it's going to take is going to be very short compared to how long it would take to learn a natural language. Natural languages are the languages that most of us speak. English, Italian, French, Chinese. They evolve naturally. But the language that philosophers invented for these checking procedure tests is an artificial language, because it didn't evolve naturally over millennia. It was created by a small group of people and tinkered with and changed, and is intentionally designed to be simple and bare bones. So before we can learn these checking procedures, we have to take English and we have to do what's called translate it or symbolize it. from English into sentence logic. And then to practice, we'll go the other direction as well. The essential component, the core component of this language are atomic sentences. That's why it's called sentence logic, because they are the main basic component of the language. And what we're going to do is we're going to take atomic sentences, which are claims or statements that have a truth value. So we're not going to be symbolizing any expressions of feeling or commands or questions. We're going to be symbolizing statements. And for basic statements, we're just going to use capital letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, and so on, all the way to Z. And if we needed more letters than just the 26, we could always appeal to subscripts, like A sub 1, B sub 1, A sub 2. So that'll give us an infinite number of sentence letters. Okay. Take this statement. Ryan lives in California. It's a basic sentence. We're going to symbolize it with a capital letter, and it's up to us to choose which one we want that to be. And so, why don't we just use C? Here's another one. The 49ers will win the Super Bowl. We could use S or B or A, but I've chosen F here for 49ers. Okay, so basic sentences like these just get capital letters. All right, let's look at a different kind of statement. A negation. Here's an example of a negated statement. Ryan doesn't live in Florida. Well, Ryan lives in Florida would be F, or some other letter, but you could pick R. But let's say Ryan lives in Florida, does live in Florida is F. So doesn't live in Florida, we're going to put this little tilde symbol, looks like a little squiggle. That's the symbol for negation. So if the 49ers will win the Super Bowl as F, then we will represent the 49ers will not or won't win the Super Bowl with negation F. Right? And so notice that I used, as long as I stipulate what F means, I could use F for a variety of sentences, as long as you're consistent. Okay. Now, let's talk about conjunctions. Conjunctions are and statements. For example, this statement, Ryan lives in California and he doesn't live in Oregon. Well, there are two parts of that. Ryan lives in California. Let's say that that's C. And let's say that Ryan lives in Oregon is O. So then this is going to be C and not O, because I don't live in Oregon. So conjunctions are special statements. They're and statements. And we're going to symbolize and with a common symbol that we know for and, the ampersand. So there's the statement. Ryan lives in California, C. The and is the ampersand. And then lives in Oregon would be O. Doesn't live in Oregon would be negation O. How about this? The 49ers will win the Super Bowl and the Ravens won't. F and not R. F and not R. F for the 49ers will win the Super Bowl, and the ampersand for and then not R because it's false that the Ravens will win the Super Bowl. They won't. And by the way, other systems of sentence logic use a dot for and, so you can see it there. Or they also use the caret, so that sort of looks like a triangle with the bottom part missing. And you can use whatever you want, but since you guys are going to be typing these symbols, the ampersand will be easiest because you can type that with your keyboard. Okay, so Negations, language like not or it is not the case that, those are special. The word and is a special term in sentence logic, as is the word or. Or statements, you probably have heard conjunction before, but you might not have heard the word disjunction. Disjunctions are or statements. For example, either the 49ers will win the Super Bowl or the Ravens will. We'll symbolize that as F or R. So we'll symbolize or with this little V symbol. It's called the wedge, but it translates as or. All right, so we've got not for the negation, we've got ampersand for and we have the wedge for or. Not, and or, special symbols. And we have our basic atomic sentences. They're called atomic because you can't really break them down, just like it was once believed that we could not break the atom down. Here's a common phrase that we see in English, not both. Let's say that you have a couple friends and they're dating each other. One of your friends is named Jose and another is Juliet. And Juliet and Jose are a couple. And you invite them to your birthday party. So here's how you would symbolize Jose is coming. You could use J. Juliet is coming. You could use U. Now we don't want to use J again. Earlier, I used F for different sentences, and as long as you're doing it separately, that's okay. But if you're going to combine them with a symbol like and or, then you need to use different symbols, and that's why I went to U, and I just went to the next letter of the most important word, Juliet, and we used up J, so I go to the next letter in Juliet, which is U. So Jose's coming would be J, Juliet's coming would be U. How would we do Jose is not coming? And how would we do Juliet isn't coming? Well, we would just put a little negation in front of the J or the U. How would we symbolize Jose and Juliet are both coming? Well, both implies and, right? So it would be Jose is coming and Juliet is coming, which of course would be J and U. So I hope that makes sense. Jose is coming is J, Juliet is coming is U, Jose isn't coming is not J, Juliet isn't coming is not U. If they're both coming, then we could form a single sentence, J and U. What if we knew that they are not both coming? You know, let's say that they got into an argument, maybe they broke up, and they decided that they didn't want to see each other at the party. And so maybe Jose says, okay, you know, we don't want to go together, but maybe you go. Maybe Juliet says, no, Jose, you can go. Maybe they decide the fairest thing would be that neither of them are going to go. But what you know for sure is that they won't be at the party together. They don't want to be at the party together. So here's how you would translate or symbolize that. Not, and now we're going to introduce a new aspect of our language, the use of parentheses. We're going to put the J and U in parentheses and then put the negation out in front of that. If you didn't have those parentheses, then the negation would only apply to the J. So that would, if you didn't have the parentheses, it would be telling us that Jose isn't coming and Juliet is. But that's not what we want to say. We want to say that it's false that they're both coming. They're not both coming. And again, what that means is that maybe one will come, maybe the other, maybe neither will come. We don't know. All of that's possible, but what we know for sure is that it's false that they will both come, not both. And in general, that's how you symbolize not both. Another equally correct way of doing that is what I have here, is an or statement. Since you know that they're not both going to come, you know that either Jose is not going to come or Juliet's not going to come. Because they're not both going to come. Right? So that's another way to do it. And in a little while, in another section coming up in the class, we're going to learn a rule that explicitly tells us that these two statements are equivalent. And it's named after a philosopher whose last name was De Morgan, and it's called De Morgan's Rule or De Morgan's Law. And you can kind of think of it as a sort of distribution of that negation symbol, right? We do that in algebra where we distribute a negation through an expression. So that negation on the outside of the parentheses distributes to both the j and the u. And that's fine to think of it that way, as long as you have to remember to change that and into an or. If you fail to do that, then what you've come up with would be wrong, right? If you had an and instead of that or between the not j and the not u, then what you would be saying is that neither of them is coming. But that's too strong. You don't want to say neither is coming. You don't know that. You just know that they're not both coming. Okay, so again, that means that we might see Julia, but not Jose. We might see Jose, but not Juliet. And maybe we won't see either of them. But what we know for sure is we definitely won't see them both at the party. Okay, so that's not both. This is going to be complicated for some of you. Some of you are going to be like, oh wow, this stuff's really neat, I like it. Some of you are going to be like, oh, this seems really mathematical and algebraic, and I don't like that kind of stuff. So feel free to pause and replay. Feel free to email me with questions, and come talk to me in office hours. All right, here's another statement that's common. Neither nor. So let's continue with our Jose and Juliet example. Maybe Juliet and Jose decided the fairest thing would be for neither of them to go. So the statement is neither Jose nor Juliet will be at the party. Here's how we would properly symbolize that. We could negate an or statement. Consider that statement with the parentheses without the, sorry, that was kind of confusing. That statement on the left, the negation of j wedge u. Imagine there were no parentheses there. Imagine there was no parentheses nor a negation. If it just said j or u, well, that would be telling you that either Jose or Juliet's coming, right? You can think of it as at least one of them is coming, Juliet or Jose. But we're saying that that's false. It's false that either of them is coming, because neither is coming. You can also express that through De Morgan's law as a conjunction of two negated statements. In other words, since neither of them is coming, you know not J and not U. Jose is not coming and Juliet is not coming, because neither is coming. So those two statements are equivalent. And again, you can see that distribution with the negation. The negation distributes through the expression both to J and to the U. It's fine to think of that way, but you just have to remember to change the wedge to an and, or you're going to get a wrong answer. Here's another instance of neither nor. The Super Bowl is neither on Monday nor Tuesday, right? That's something someone might say if you didn't know much about American football. I've heard about this big sporting event. It's televised. The advertisements are really hilarious and expensive. What day is it? Well, I'm not sure, but I know that it's not on Monday, nor is it on Tuesday. Well, you could express that as the statement negation, and then in parentheses M or T, right? So it's false that the Super Bowl's on Monday or Tuesday. Another way to do it would just be simply to say that it's false that the Super Bowl's on Monday, and it's false that the Super Bowl's on Tuesday. So notice that's another way of reading the negation. Instead of not M and not T, you can use the expression it's false that, or it is not the case that. All right, so that's neither nor. So I want to hone in on or a little bit. We were talking about disjunctions, right? Those are or statements. And it turns out that we use or in at least two different sorts of ways. we use it exclusively, and sometimes we use it inclusively. So before I define those, I will just tell you that the wedge, the symbol we use for or, is always inclusive. And so what that means is that whenever you have a statement like A or B, that is an exclusive use of or if it's possible for both A and B to be the case. So that might have been a little confusing. That would be understandable. So let me give you this example to clear that up. We know from studying deduction and induction, we looked at that chart at the beginning of the course, we know about soundness and unsoundness. And if you've forgotten, remember the definition of a sound argument is that it has all true premises and is valid. Thus, the definition that we see here of an unsound argument is that it's either invalid or it has at least one false premise. You might ask, well, what if you come across an argument that is invalid and has a false premise? Well, then, of course, it would be unsound. So the or there is inclusive. It's unsound if it's invalid or has at least one false premise or both. That's what makes it inclusive. It includes the possibility of both. So here's how we would symbolize that part after the if of the statement. It's invalid, so it's false that it's valid, or there's at least one false premise. So we don't have to actually capture that or both part. It's already built in to the wedge. It's built into our or symbol. So here's the other kind of or statement, an exclusive variety. We get this at restaurants. The server might come to your table and ask you, would you like soup or salad? And they don't say it explicitly, but they imply, or the implication is that you have to pick one, right? You can't have both. That's not how the restaurants aren't charities. They'll give you one of the things with your meal, but if you want both, you would have to pay extra. But if you're not going to pay extra, then you have to pick one. So here's how we would symbolize that. We start with a basic or statement. So let S be defined as you can have soup. Let A be defined as you can have salad. So we've got S or A in parentheses. But then we need to specify that both is not an option. Otherwise, we will assume that it is, because as I said, that inclusivity is built into the wedge. Well, look at what's in parentheses after you can have soup or salad, but not both. It turns out that the word but is just another way of saying and. Right? I might say, it's Monday, but it's raining. Well, we could symbolize that as M and R. So this also, when we talk about that, you might realize that our bare bones language doesn't capture all of the subtleties and nuances of our natural language, because there's some sort of negative connotation that's not captured by the and, but that's okay. So but will be and. So we've got S or A, and then the but, we've got the and, the ampersand, not both. Well, we know how to do not both. That's why I taught you how to do not both right before I talked about exclusive versus inclusive or. So not both is just the negation of both, right? So we go through the sentence one more time. You can have soup or salad. Well, in parentheses, you can have S or A, soup or salad, and you can't have both. It's false that you can have soup and salad, S and A. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, so I've taught you about negations, conjunctions, disjunctions, right? And statements, or statements, not statements. And then we looked at not both, neither nor, and now inclusive versus exclusive or. So there are a couple other important symbols in our language. One of them is the arrow, which specifies a conditional relationship. And this goes with if-then statements. So you might hear something like this. If Jose goes to the party, then Juliet will go. You know, sometimes we don't say the then, right? I could have rephrased that and just cut the then out. It would have had the same meaning. If Jose goes to the party, Juliet will go. So just note that sometimes we omit the then when we write and speak. So we're going to represent that relationship with an arrow. And this is a little bit different because the if is at the beginning of the sentence, but the symbol is actually in the middle. So J arrow you, or J then you, or J implies you. Right? What that means is if J, then you. And J means Jose goes to the party, and you is Juliet will go. By the way, a common mistake is to think that, for example, J, if I say, what does J mean? You might say, oh, J means Jose. And I might ask you, what does you mean? You might say, oh, I know, you means Juliet. That's actually false. So if you want to pause for a second and think about why, that would be good. The capital letters, they never stand for a single word or object. They have to represent a complete statement, a complete declarative sentence. So J does not stand for just Jose. It stands for Jose goes to the party, right? Subject, predicate, complete sentence. So if J, then you. If Jose goes, then Juliet will go. Well, so how are you going to type these symbols? Well, for the wedge, just use a lowercase v. For and, the ampersand, use the ampersand, right, which is shift on the 7, number 7 on your keyboard. For the negation, you can use the that symbol is there, right? It's to the left of the 1 key usually. So what are you going to do for arrow? Well, if you can figure out a way to make an arrow with your computer, that's great. But if you can't, why don't you just use the dash symbol, which is next to the 0. Just hit dash dash, no shift there, just hit dash is the shorter one, dash dash, and then the symbol that that looks like greater than, and that is to the left of the question mark. And it's if the period key, if you just hit shift, you'll hit that. So that sort of looks like an arrow. And actually, my computer turns that, when I hit dash dash greater than, it turns it into the arrow. So maybe yours will too. But if it doesn't, that's fine. And if that doesn't make any, if you can't figure out how to do that, then just send me an email. Usually, if you type something like that, I can kind of figure it out. By the way, another symbol that is used in place of the arrow is the horseshoe, and it sort of looks like a capital U that is turned on its side. Sometimes we use the phrase only if, right? So Jose will go to the party only if Juliet goes. And that's actually going to be symbolized. I mean, so look at, is this the right symbolization? U arrow J. Jose will go to the party only if Juliet goes? No, it's not right. It should be J arrow U. Because what that's so Jose will go only if Juliet goes. In other words, if Jose goes, then Juliet goes. Right? Or another way to think of it would be if Juliet doesn't go, then Jose doesn't go, right? If Juliet doesn't go, then Jose's not going to go. Why? Well, because Jose will go only if Juliet goes. Okay, so be careful. What I put there is actually incorrect, so you want to cross that off. The right answer is J arrow U. So the right answer is this. For Jose goes only if Juliet goes. Why? Well, because think about it. Another way of saying that, and I'll say it again, if Juliet doesn't go, then Jose won't go. Why? Because Jose will go only if Juliet goes. All right, hope that makes sense. Well, here's another example if it doesn't. You're a dog only if you're a mammal. It's either going to be M. So let's say you're a dog is D and you're a mammal is M. It's either going to be M then D, or M arrow D, or D arrow M. What do you think it is? So maybe pause and think about it. It's going to end up being M arrow D, right? If you're a dog only if you're a mammal, what that's telling you is that if you are a mammal, then you're a dog, because you're a dog only if you're a mammal. If you're a mammal, that guarantees you're a dog, because you're a dog only if you're a mammal. I think if you say it several times, it'll click. Now how about this? We lose the only. You're a mammal if you're a cat. I mean, that's true, right? You're a mammal if you're a cat. Well, notice we could rephrase that, right? Another way of saying that is move that if clause in the front. If you're a cat, then you're a mammal. And then that's a plain old if you're a cat, so C, you're a mammal, M. So that's going to be C arrow M. All right. So here is, so notice the order is reversed, right? The cat is the last word in the sentence, but it's the first word in the symbolization. That's because you have the term if in the middle. If you have the term if in the middle, then you have to reverse the order. But if the if is in the front, or you've got the phrase only if in the middle, like we do with the dog mammal example, then you're going to keep the order as it appears, right?